Welcome, everybody. I would like to call the Monday, October 28th policy meeting to order at this time. Don't believe we have anybody here for public comment, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graham and get started on the agenda.
Sure, thank you. So we only have one policy on the agenda tonight, and that is JICJR, which is possession and use of personal electronic devices or district-owned devices. We have this policy, although it is a relatively new policy, it is on the agenda for amendments tonight in line with the updated state proviso and model policy from the state regarding use of cell phones in schools, proviso 1.103. And so we need to make some modifications to our current policy to bring it in line with that proviso. You all can see, I think I shared with everybody in advance the proposed changes. Essentially, our policy, as we had already updated it, was already in line for elementary and middle school. So the changes that we're looking at are really only at the high school level. So if you scroll down to the high school portion, you will see that one of the first changes that we need to look at is in terms of student access to the device, because the proviso does not allow access bell to bell essentially at any point, and our policy had allowed students to have it during ILT in transition periods. And so we had students keeping their cell phones in pouches on the backs of doors during class time, and then accessible during the transitions in ILT. So the changes here are to reflect the proviso, but certainly open for discussion in terms of how best to reflect that in our policy and how best to store those devices. Students.
Awesome, I appreciate it. Yeah, so obviously, as she said, bell to bell is the new criteria, which means basically from the start of school till the end of school, the first bell to the end of school day. And so what we were looking at, and part of what I was thinking of changing in this one, and it's obviously up for discussion, is maybe saying an area designated by the superintendent. Because I worry about specifying any area, and let's say we try backpacks and we decide, oh, that is not working. We liked those pouches. That was easier to enforce. I don't want to like lump us into having to use a backpack and not being able to use those pouches, or if there's a combination that we want to utilize. And so I guess, A, that would maybe be my recommended language, but B, I would like to talk to y'all about just operationalizing it just for the public's knowledge and Dr. Robbins' knowledge as to if we want to stick with the pouches and utilize that because that's been successful. I know we've talked about allowing kids to put it in their backpacks and having backpacks at the front of the room as an option, but then we've talked about kids having to go in their backpacks for stuff and that being a logistical nightmare, and then going to the front of the room constantly. So I just kind of wanted to get y'all's feedback on what's working for you, if you're open to changes or you like it with the pouches.
So what we're suggesting here is the pouches during the class period and then the book bags during transitions and ILT. Is that what?
Yes. And does any other, I know we've heard different things about backpacks, like one of the issues we're running into that you guys, I think more so, are when you're doing those searches and they're found in the backpack. Yes, maybe talk a little bit more about what they're doing at each school, or like when you find a backpack.
So we do it a little differently. The students can either put it in the pouch or they can have it in their book bag, but they have to take everything out for the instructional class block. And then they don't go back in their book bag the rest of the period. So if we ever have a search and the student has a phone in their bag, it's not really an issue for us.
Okay. And you don't find that that's creating issues with students having to go back and forth a lot throughout?
No, because it's part of the start of the block instruction, which is you take everything out to your.
So is that up to the individual teachers, how they institute?
Some do it where you have to use the pouch. Most really just do, a blend. So we favor one, pro two, and that's sort of that first couple minutes where everybody is getting out instructional materials, putting everything away, securing it. And then of course we have kids on some medical plans due to diabetes or like hearing aids, things that, and I think we have to discuss today how that.
So there was some concern about do the teachers find that that is easy to enforce? We want to make it so it's. you
Yeah,
know,
I think it is
Force-
because I think no matter what, some kids are gonna have like 500 devices on them or different things. So I think the majority of kids, if they're caught with their device when they're not supposed to, are pretty good about following the procedure, handing it over to a teacher. And they have their, level one consequences with the ISS. And we really don't see a lot of repeat offenders after that.
I think the challenge for the three, if we go with a blended option, which I'm not opposed to it either, is if you do the search, the random search, and there's a phone in there, what is our response? If you're using both options, then the response is, as long as it's turned off or in their bag, they're not accessing it. But if we start in building A, we discipline when we do a random search and find it, and building B, we don't, then that puts us and puts me in a very difficult situation because of consistency. So I think what we're trying to figure out is what is going to work best for your teachers, and are we consistent with our application?
Good.
I was just saying, I just have a couple of thoughts. First, a point of clarification. So in our school, we didn't have options other than you were told the place to put it is in the pouch. And so that's why they were disciplined if they had it in their bag, because they kept their bag at their seat. They potentially had access to it. They did all that. We weren't searching for phones. We were looking for other contraband, and the phone was what was found. That's why we have done this so far based on how we instituted the policy to this point. We now have to make a change for January. So there's got to be a change in how the plan works.
Let me interrupt, because I just want to say, technically, that is what you should have done. I guess we didn't, and that's on us, and my job to own that is foresee the searches, bringing up the phones, and what do you do in that case? And did we have a different discipline tier, right? For, is the phone off and in the backpack, or is it in the pouch? And to your point, and kind of what I do like what you did, is the spirit of it is to put it in the pouch, because I understand that we weren't searching kids to find phones. And so we weren't gonna sit there and nitpick if one kid's parent was like, you better not put your phone in that pouch, just turn it off, keep it in your backpack. And we didn't really want to necessarily create an issue where that was a big problem, but we do generally want all the kids putting their phones away, because I don't want to create a situation where a teacher shows up, is in class, and it's a constant battle of they're going in their backpack trying to access it, or it's just, so I understand. So to
I
defend.
think I'm on record. Last summer policy meeting, when we were putting our initial policy in place, I felt from an enforcement standpoint that it was important to get the phones off their person.
Right.
And I thought that was a big deal. And what we've heard overwhelmingly from teachers, and you guys speak up if I misspeak on your behalf, but I think teachers have been clear that there's a huge difference in their classroom right now. They do not feel like the cell phone police anymore. They're not watching, they're not having to call and report and deal, because by and large, the students don't have a cell phone out in class. And so we've had issues, and when we've had searches or whatever, sometimes the cell phones were the only person in their pockets, when they came out with their search, and that's why we got them home. Sometimes, yes, we looked through their bag and it was in their bag. So there's a multitude of reasons we found it, but obviously that does have to change going forward. And I think to the point you brought up at the beginning of perhaps there's a blended path, or there's ways to do it. I think the clarity has been simple. If it's clear and there's a single path to do this right, it makes it really easy for us to explain it to families, and it makes it really easy for us to police it. It doesn't leave anything for, every teacher. And I think this is something that we really learn as we move out of the classroom and into administration. What every teacher assumes is going on in everyone else's classroom, they think it all works like their classroom. And it doesn't. It's very different from person to person, the personality of that teacher, how they run their classroom. And there is no smart administrator that is going to assume we're leaving to interpretation that it's all going to be okay. So we've got to be pretty defined about what we're saying and what we're going to do. I think that's kind of my thought, is we need a clear path. And to communicate it well, it can be understood by everybody, that we can hold. So I still believe having it in the pouches on the walls is good, but that's not gonna work because they have to leave that classroom and take it out of that pouch. And so we have a new problem that I don't really know of a good solution to. So I think we are talking about them keeping their phones on their person. And what does that look like? But I will tell you that the honeymoon for the first semester that our teachers have had, where they feel like they're not the phone police in their classroom, we're going back to what we dealt with before, because students will have access to their phones. Whether they follow our rules or break our rules, they're going to seek access to our phones. They're teenagers, they will.
I
And
think they were anyway. I mean, I think at least for us, we were very clear. Day one, every day, there's a slide. So whether it was in the pouch or in your book bag, we really didn't have issues in the classroom with that. It was more, the kids had kept it in their pocket, snuck it out into the hallway, and we were consistent with that. So I do think that it is consistency and it is followed through. And I'll tell you, I know that our media specialist emailed Dr. Robbins, to let him know that she had a massive increase in books being checked out because kids couldn't access their phones. So she actually showed like how many books were checked out, last year at this time, and it literally increased over 50% because kids were now going and checking out books. So that when they had downtime and they were allowed to do something, go to the park, or do something that lasts 5 to 10 minutes, they're reading books. I know my son's checking books out. But I do agree that I think, I don't know what the answer is. I think the biggest problem is going to be is that our selling point has been that the kid could access their phone at an appropriate time, which really helped offset the self-control issue of why I'm not accessing it
Right.
during class. And now during transitions, and especially I think during IoT, that is going to be difficult. And we're already supervising, for safety and other things. And I'm just thinking about how that's going to be at lunch with, all the kids out at one time and then trying to stop a kid that's got their phone out and hope that they're going to comply when everybody's transitioning at the same time, or moving around or moving someplace. So that's a concern, but,
Do you have a thought about a way that would be helpful to?
I don't. Initially, when we first talked about it, I actually said to Dr. Robbins that I thought we should go to the yonder pouches. But then he said that they had done some research of some other schools that had done it and it just really didn't work. And he said, I don't want to spend the money. If we spend all this money and then it doesn't really work.
Biggest negative, and that's my biggest.
It's a
concern.
substantial,
I
like,
hate to spend the money. I mean,
Right, so if it's not really gonna be effective, I don't wanna rush, but then I also know. I mean, you guys can say what you think, I just think, especially lunch is just gonna be off
Yeah.
and they will comply, and we'll do what we gotta do no matter what, I mean, we will.
I don't know, aside from those yonder pouches or a backpack, is there another option? Like during a time where they're not constrained to a classroom?
The problem for us is with high school students, they show up late for late arrivals, they leave early, they have doctor's appointments, they co-op. And so if we centralize a location, it's going to be a constant disruption for them to go and get that phone once they move. And so that really honestly is just not an option.
So, kind of circling back, I just want to say that I'm not saying either approach was wrong with the backpacks at the front of the room or the pouch. I do think for me personally, as one individual board member and just my perspective from what I've witnessed, I worry about not utilizing the pouches because I think there's a certain level of, it's new, there's an expectation in some classes to put it in the pouches. So if you were to totally get rid of that, I worry what that's gonna cause. Are we gonna be back in the same exact position we were in? Because essentially phones were not allowed during instructional time before. And I think it might be easy to enforce at first because they're in the habit of that. But I think as they start to realize that it is accessible, they can do it. They can put their backpack on their lap and sit on their phone. I worry that that will then become, again, a constant enforcement problem for teachers. And then some teachers who have different personalities are going to be less likely to want to enforce that because it becomes burdensome. And then you're going to have the teachers that are versus not. And I just felt like this really even the playing field for regardless of what your personality was as a teacher, regardless of what your individual classroom was like, it was like, this was the expectation. But I do think we have to address two separate things. We have to address, okay, well, what did that look like when we do find that phone? Because I don't think the consequence for a kid having their phone often in their backpack should be the same for a kid that's deliberately defying and using their phone. So that's maybe something operationally, student handbook update that we're gonna have to address and say, okay, if your parent really has a strong feeling like your phone's worth money and they don't want to put it in there, then that's something we're gonna have to deal with on a case by case basis, or maybe have a different enforcement mechanism based on that. Because that did bring that to light, you know?
And,
Yeah.
and I don't disagree that having it in the pouch gave us a more solid control and a system that everybody could follow. But the new reality is we have to control it during transition in IoT. And so that means two ways that we have to tell them we're gonna do it. I would also offer, and I know parents feel how they feel, and a lot of them have voiced their opinions. I've read them. But putting your phone in a clear pouch in front of everybody's eyes on the wall in the classroom versus all the book bags we're now gonna pile up at the front of the room and have your phone probably in the top pouch or the outside pocket. And so somebody that knows that wants to steal phones, that wants to grab phones, it's gonna have a much easier time to steal a phone from that pile of book bags over there when they go over there to get their stuff and they reach into the wrong bag and grab something versus walk up in front of everybody that's looking at that pouch hanging on the wall and taking it. So I think the idea that your phone is safer on your person than it was hanging in that pouch, I don't believe that. I think.
That's not how we did it though. I mean, we had a procedure in row 1, row 2. You put it in your book bag, you secure it. Some teachers said you to put it at your feet in front of you. It was supposed to be someplace, some chose the front of the room, some chose the side, but even pick up and drop off is row 1, row 2, row 3. The last 5 minutes, we do the same thing for the pouch or the bag. And that's why, and we've not had one issue with that.
Okay.
We've not had one issue.
I don't think they have either way. And so I do see what you're saying too.
But the only reason we did that, give some choices, we had some heartburn, and because there was some concerns with some of the teachers, because it was a pouch. And as opposed to something that locked. And we talked about lock cases
Right.
and different things for the period, and just in the time frame that we were at to get something. Because we were trying to be on the forefront of this policy going through the state. And so that's why, but I do think no matter what, we're gonna, at least in Somerville, we're gonna have to change that with this new guideline.
And I don't think either of you were wrong in it. I think, we were navigating in uncharted territory. Again, just for consistency's sake, I do like that idea of the pouches remaining, but the reality is, yes, we are gonna now have a situation where we're in ILT and transition periods or passing periods. So we will have to have 2 different expectations. And so my question for y'all then is, if we do that, if it's pouch during instructional time and backpack during ILT, is that enforceable? A, B, do we have any other option? And, yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm getting
I
at.
would imagine, I would say this as a parent, if I take off my principal's hat and put my dad hat, I would say, so you can trust my child to keep it in their bag during transitions and lunch, but you can't trust them to keep it in their bag in the classroom?
No, I think the
What kind of
reality is we
system is
wouldn't,
this?
we don't, but we have no other option.
Well, it doesn't make sense though, I mean, to say that it has to be in the pouch versus, that it would be in the backpack sometimes.
But you have no other option during ILT. And
No,
so,
I know.
yeah.
So then it seems like, well, if you're doing it then why wouldn't you do it in the class as well? Because.
So I don't know, I guess I'm confused. Do you support the pouches or do you support the backpacks? Because
I don't want to.
But like, I can both sides of that. We can put it down the tree.
No, it's not-
Throw them out the chain.
I understand. Yes, I know.
I mean,
Trust me, as a parent.
Well, I agree. I'm not thrilled about the change either. And I think what we wanted to happen to me, the kids have been off of their phones and the feedback has been phenomenal, that it's working. And so it's unfortunate now that we're here, we've done something that's worked so well and we're gonna have to try to change this. And we don't want that either. I mean,
I have a question. If they can't use their phone anytime during the day, just tell them don't bring the phone.
Yeah, but they have after school, before school.
I know.
we got kids, these are kids who drive though. I mean, as a mom of kids who, my kid had an accident on Friday. I mean, they've had a call, like,
I mean, I'm just.
Well, they don't all have cars. What about the bus driver? They don't have to tell their parents, my bus is late or, you know, like you've got kids.
You have to stay home for this, or stay
I
after.
understand,
I never
but I'm just saying, it just seems like.
I know. I mean, in a perfect world, that would be a great option, except that then the parents really will freak out because then they.
I mean, even from a parent perspective, just full transparency, I was just telling them before this meeting, when my kid gets a bad grade come through on Power School and I know that they can look at their phone during ILT, I'm like, you better report to Ms. Moss's room and handle that during ILT. And I know that they're gonna get it during ILT. And I'm sad as a parent that there's not that accountability measure for me. And I know my kids are putting their phone in the pouches and doing all the things. And so it is like, so, but we're put in this position where we don't have a choice. The last thing I want to do is end up where we were before, where our teachers are having to try to enforce something, and then we end up on this slippery slope where at first it's fine, and then it becomes a problem where some are and some aren't, it becomes too difficult. But I just don't know any other option, like ILT, if they report to a classroom, it could still be required they put it in the pouch. Maybe if you're just in the cafeteria or, I really don't know. Yeah.
None of them.
Yeah.
go to the
Yeah,
class. They're very smart.
I
I
did
just
not,
said the classrooms will be empty.
nobody's making up seats.
So I talked to Lauren and Michelle and Tripp about this. We kind of talked about a couple of different things. And as I'm just sitting here thinking of when I was in their shoes of trying to manage this. And I know there is, first of all, there is no perfect solution, right? There's just not. And we may even have to, revisit whatever it is we try or attempt to do. But from a financial perspective, because we are constrained somewhat by finances, and from a practicality standpoint, the less opportunity there is for the physical touch of that phone, the better off we are. And so at the end of the day, they're not allowed to have it on their person from bell to bell. So that's changing classes, that's ILT, so in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, after talking to the three of them, that I almost lean towards the backpack, where it's in your backpack, and the first 5 minutes, like y'all described, you get your materials out you need for biology, and your backpack is done. You don't access your backpack anymore.
But it needs to be away from them, because they
But-
would be.
Well, yeah,
Well, that's
I
what
would- I wouldn't even go that far. It just depends on your class, because not necessarily does it need to be in front of the classroom. Because to get into your backpack, you're still making movement to get into your backpack. I'm just not certain that going into pouches, going into a backpack, it's just back and forth, it's out and around, and then you're giving them opportunity. It goes into the backpack once the school day starts, and it doesn't come out of the backpack till the school day ends. That's my opinion on how the easiest way to manage this, and then we deal with whatever the
Well, and
ramifications.
that, I think that especially makes sense to in my mind, we think about the changing of class in between the blocks, because then you're not having to grab it and you can't say, oh, I haven't put it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point.
I mean, it never should have come out in the first place if you didn't have to go. put it
I
in the
didn't,
pouch. So.
yeah, no, that's a great point. I really honestly in my brain didn't think about the fact that they would be having it and not, and having it and not. So if we do say backpacks, and the expectation would be they go to school, it's in that backpack. You don't see a phone all day, no matter what. And so that we're gonna be very, very reliant as a district to lean on y'all. And I hate that, like on enforcement, but I think, kids are gonna get away with what they get away with.
I think that,
You know,
I think the point that we need a clear and understandable expectation, I think that is the clearest expectation we can go forward.
right, yeah.
I feel pessimistic when I say this, but I know that enforcement will go back 180 days to last school year, where generally the rule was if your teacher didn't allow you to take it out in class, we shouldn't see your phone in class. And those were teachers that complained aloud that kids are always on their phone, kids didn't do. Those are teachers that are now excited that they're not there. And so I guess I'm just expressing my non-optimism for the fact that we're falling away from it, but I don't know how else to handle it.
But that can't be an option, which means if there are teachers that are allowing it, there
No,
has to be a go.
they would no longer allow it
Yeah,
because of the new rule. But my radio goes off constantly.
right.
You've been with me at school. The radio goes off constantly. We need assistance. in 1100, and just on and on and on, because some college decided they're getting their phone out and you can't tell me what to do.
I don't want to take anything away from local policy. The difference between this year and last year is it's a state law. And so there is a huge emphasis, out of the state and the expectation or we lose funding.
But I think that's part of the communication we've got to set up. We have to share this far and wide. To be clear, I mean, as recently as the last couple of weeks, I've had parents that say, oh, well, I didn't realize this.
Right. Which is, I don't know how.
Yeah, we've got to put some information out, before we go home at the end of the semester. We got to get this out here and have some videos, get it on social media, get posters up, do phone blast. Everybody needs to understand a state expectation. And our policy in the district reads as this: simple consequences for not following this rule. And it's clear.
I'd like to add, like for state testing, for ACT, for SAT, all these things are the law, the rule, and we don't have issues typically in almost any time when it's laid out, set up, saying you cannot have this because this is what the law and the state says. So, I mean, it's just gonna be that same type of communication as far as we put it out prior to EOCs and these tests, and the kids know the expectation. It has to be often in their book bag in the front of the room. It's not on their person, it's not.
Yeah, and I think the slight difference though is that it never was there.
Yes.
And in this case, we are putting the toothpaste back in the tube. There was a time when people had their cell phones. They never did have.
Yeah,
their 6
I think the difference also is you have from the top, from the state to the local level, to your board, an expectation and a support. Like, if a parent calls me and says, Mr. Aldridge is enforcing this policy, and I'm like, yeah, guess what? I told him to. You want to be mad at me. Want to be mad at somebody, be mad at the state, and so my optimism would like to think that the expectation that we're all on the same page, we're all doing this together, we're all like, I want to make sure that you feel just as supported. Like, if I'm going to mandate this of you, even if it's now required of me, I want you to know that I have your back 100% when that's not being enforced.
And I think that,
Yeah.
I feel that, that's not a question in my mind, and it's, I think I told, Mr. Darty last week when we were chatting, I said, just pick a horse so I can get right. Yeah, like that's where, I know we have to do it, and nothing I've said that's not optimistic today is me saying, I don't want to do this, or I'm not going to do this.
No.
I just don't feel like there's any great path that's really going to work well. And so we're going to have to pick which one we're doing. We're going to have to do the best we can to navigate it.
Well, and you're gonna have to be honest with us and give us true feedback, because if it ends up being a failure, right, and we end up back where we were, we're gonna have to squirt the toothpaste back out. We put it in the bag, squirt it back,
But in the
figure it
end,
out.
there's a state law that we have to do this, and the provisos out there, and we have to write a policy, and we have to do
So
it.
is your pessimism just based on the fact that now they can't have it during ILT?
I think,
Because that's really the only.
I think my pessimism is working with teenagers, as long as I have, they're going to break rules, they're gonna try to sneak, they're gonna try to do. And there's very few rules that have come down like this one, where we've been allowed in the past to have our phones, and now the state has said, you're not getting your phones. And school boards, you better write a policy that lines up with this, and administrators, you better toe the line and make this work and make it happen. And I just, as much as.
But I guess you're saying that do you feel like what we've asked so far of our policy has you've been able to
Yeah,
enforce?
and it's fine.
Because I guess
And
the
I would
only-
do-
Yeah,
I think from my perspective, and what we try to do as an admin team within my building is, we get our marching orders, we get our plan, and we determine how are we going to explain to our teachers, how are we going to explain to our students, our families, what we're doing, and then we're going to try to hold the line and stick to this. And I feel like we had a pretty successful rollout of how we've done it so far this year. Now the rules have changed. So we got to change the rule. That's never a good look midstream. Change the rules, and here's the new plan, and here's what we're going to do. I just know that we are all in tune as board members and administrators and have been paying attention, and we know this is coming. I feel certain most of my families, even though it's run on the news and it's been where they have no idea. And there will be accusatory, there'll be accusations out there that oh, you're just trying to do this, you're just trying.
Well, I'll tell you straight up, I sat on the state panel,
Yeah.
to look at this, and that came up because we asked the question on when are you going to give us guidelines? And they said guidelines here, instituted by January, and a few people said, well, that's concerning because then we're gonna have to change what we're doing midstream. But by and large, most people said, when it becomes the expectation, they've been able to do those types of things, and that's
And I think
multiple
it's, yeah.
superintendents across the state that made that statement.
And I want to piggyback off of what you said, and just to kind of shine light on the positive side of it, is that is why we went from trying to incorporate a cell phone policy at the beginning of the school year, even though we knew it might need to be shifted or changed. But I think it would have been a lot harder to free for all, everybody can have a cell phone until January, and then January 2025, we're like, full ban, like no access. And so I really think like this is kind of like dipping your toe in, you know, and slowly getting in the water, like, hey, we're gonna like, it's like withdrawing from your phone. You can have it just for a little bit during ILT and transitions, and now it's like, okay, now the expectation. And so I think it will be an easier transition. So I'm very grateful for our board and our district for supporting us and doing that as early as we did, even before the state did. So I guess what we need to circle back to is maybe just leaving it again, area designated by superintendent.
Okay.
And that needs to go out in a memo to our staff. And I also think because it just dawned on me, you said this, writing was from the middle school. If it says pocket, that's no longer gonna be in compliance either at the middle school.
So, yeah, we were talking about that, whether wearing, I think that I think there's probably a lot of interpretations to the state policy. But I will leave this up to the principals. If I recall, the middle school concern was that not all the kids had backpacks. And I don't know if that is a concern still, but I think that that was part of the discussion.
I know we talked
So-
about it at the high school level, because obviously we're requiring backpacks now, right? And if kids don't have backpacks, it's gonna be a lot cheaper and more reasonable to
Purchase back.
have a drive or purchase a backpack than it is a yonder pouch.
Our only two,
Um,
required things on our supply list this year was the book bag and earbuds that were wired,
But
not
we'll-
wireless.
yeah.
And honestly, through the district office and through other resources and just the schools, if a kid doesn't have a book bag, we're gonna give them a book bag.
Yes.
So if there's someone in need, most kids really have some type of bag. And I think if you choose intentionally not to come with one, I think like anything else, then I'm gonna say, well, you have no place to hold your phone, so we have to hold your phone until the end of the day. You don't
Right.
get the option, and if you won't give it to us, then you'll have to go to in-school suspension or whatever. But I think that's what it can be. You don't have a choice to put it in on your person. So if you did not bring something to put it in, it's being given you options or provide with you a book bag that you continually choose not to bring or have an excuse, then we'll hold your phone.
So for the middle school, what it says right now is stored in pocket, purse, backpack, or other non-visible secure location. So I think that we could either copy the same language, personal electronic devices stored in an area designated by the superintendent, or we could just remove pocket. I guess.
I think maybe middle school remove pocket, high school area designated by superintendent. That's my,
Yeah, I'm just still under the opinion that Pocket is wearing it. Yeah, I mean, it's,
well, I just want to make sure if we're talking about doing this all and going through all this to be in compliance, I think we need to make sure we're doing it the right way. And again, I think there's not one school, one principal, one person who's not willing to work with kids who can't afford a backpack.
you know, the other.
Yeah, I was just raising. I
No,
think that
not
was
you.
the
I'm just saying
concern
in general.
When we talked about it.
That was more of like
Like, I think
a,
there was a long conversation about pocket.
Yeah.
Just gave.
yeah, I just don't want somebody to think like, you know, I would hope that people know that it's not us being insensitive. Like we would wholeheartedly want to make sure somebody's provided with that. reason.
Contact the churches, and they would donate.
Oh, yeah, we can get backpacks. That's,
I don't know
I'm
if
not
it was
worried
about
about
the
the students that
affording it.
can't get a book
They
bag.
didn't want to.
It's that, it's the ones choosing not to bring. a
Yes,
book
I
bag
think they do want
that are
to.
going to create an issue.
you know, I don't know
Well,
how
then I
many,
really like Michelle's.
I don't know how many cameras Fort has, how many, I know Somerville has about 238 cameras. Ashley Ridge has about 180 cameras. And at the end of the day, the policy is it's stowed from bell to bell. And if we pull a camera up and a kid's out with their phone, you violated our policy. We have canvassed our buildings with these cameras. So it's not like they have to be the, cell phone police. It's just the expectation. We didn't draft this proviso.
Otherwise, we would have ILC.
So, because it's working, but they changed it, that's what they've put into writing and they've tied our funding to it if we don't.
And I think communication of that to our community is gonna be huge.
I think that's huge. I'm sure he'll work with the communications team to ensure we're getting stuff out. If you need support from the district for having like a unified message, like graphic or, something.
But I think when we're pointing to the fact that this state provides that now is a district policy that, like, it's not the 3 individual principals or the 3 individual schools, making this up. Like, this is,
Or the school.
yeah, I mean, it's coming from all the way to the State House.
So all the other changes we're gonna leave. We're just going to
So we're,
change that portion.
what else are we changing?
So we had the part about high school principals may modify the definition of instructional school day. That
Yes, we
is
had to
no
take that
longer
out.
in line with the proviso. And then removal of ILT, removal of other funds authorized by the principal. I will say that the proviso says that there can be exceptions. They just need to be documented. So I think, for students who have medical issues, et cetera, it just needs to be written in their file.
Is that, we outlined that in our policy though, right?
I don't know that it says it in the policy. I was looking for it earlier, but it doesn't have to be because that's inherently a 504 is inherently to modify a policy. So I think that is not necessary to write it in there. And then we're removing the part about it being put in pouches.
So would there be any situation where there is a student who needs it and does not have a 504 or they
Helping and
Yeah,
cannot?
I believe I understand that maybe there are some instructional uses from time to time, but
From a district standpoint, I'd love to see us say that there's either a 504 medical.
Yeah.
There's 2 or 3 reasons.
Our devices capture everything we need and Fine Arts has, ancillary support, equipment, no, cell phones are not.
So, but I'm just saying, so there shouldn't be any situation where a student needs it and that student does
It's
not.
not
have a
covered
504 or
by
be able to have a
504 IEP, or what's the third situation?
Right, we have IP.
But again, I
yeah,
think,
they have a health.
Do you think it needs to be outlined in
but our
policy?
community needs that communication, that if you believe there's a reason that your child needs it, it's not up to mom to say, you get to keep it. Mom had to go through the process of having the 504.
I think most of those students have already been addressed because if they need it at any point during the school day, they have already needed it in class. So I think pretty much all of those situations have already been addressed.
Do we say anywhere that they cannot have it on their person in this policy?
On their what? I'm sorry.
In on their person,
Their person.
Yes.
A great question. I don't know that we specifically say,
This is
it doesn't say can't be on your person. I think it's more the opposite.
It has to be.
Where it has to be, not where it cannot be. But certainly, I mean, we could add something in there.
So that's why we're gonna remove the pocket from the middle school. Or
Well, I mean, essentially, that does say that it has to be in the backpack, then. Can't really say, I mean, that's still, I guess, technically on your person, because you're carrying your backpack, so you have it in there, but it's not.
I think on your person is anywhere like captured on your body. So whether that's like a pocket or in your hand.
But if it has to be in your backpack, then it can't be in any of those other things.
Yeah.
It can only be in the backpack.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So we're keeping on this first page, that bottom sentence, high school students, other non-visible secure locations. That's very vague. We're
No,
not keeping it.
no, we're changing that. That's the one we changed to by place designated by the superintendent, right? Isn't that what we changed?
Should be, that's high school.
Yes, although I do see what you're saying, Dr. Wilson, that first part, can you scroll it back up just a minute? Yes, right there. Sorry, my computer died. That first part under high school students, I think, is that what you're saying, Dr. Wilson? Is that it says that you may possess it in non-visible?
I thought we took that off.
Well, we added the paragraph under the sentence underneath that it must be stored in your pocket. But I think that's the question, is should we
You're
delete?
talking about school transportation?
Wait, I thought that's where we changed.
Devices are not,
I thought we changed.
that's not the part we changed.
Oh.
We
okay.
changed,
Need to change that. I thought that's.
I've heard concerns about bus drivers not wanting their phones out on the
The
bus.
part that we changed is underneath the bullet points, just to turn the page.
This one? Oh, I thought that's the one we changed.
Underneath the bullet points where it says,
So they can use
You
them.
took all that out, but I thought you changed.
I thought we changed this to say
Yeah, that's
high school students, well, this is gonna say area designated by superintendent.
that it said devices as described on school property, provided they are not used and activated, it says. Scroll. That they are not visible. So he's saying that is not as specific, because you're just saying, provided that it's in a not visible location, as opposed to this one.
Oh, that's, no, this is different, maybe that's electronic.
So I think that what he's saying is because it says,
I was saying.
provided that they are not visible,
just
used,
cross
or
out that
activated. And then down here, we say specifically what that means. But I think the question is, do we need to modify this sentence? I say it's not any place that's not visible.
Yeah,
It is a specific
say-
place that's not visible.
may possess personal electronic
Is that what you
devices as described above on school property, provided such device is in student's backpack.
Yeah, okay, I'll make that change, sorry, my computer did.
Yes.
I did just want to clarify, are we removing purses as well? Because that was on there. So
For
only backpacks?
high school, it will only be backpack.
Yeah.
For middle school, I'm fine with just removing pocket
Right.
because
Yes, definitely.
the other ones are fine. Purses will be on middle school. Okay, and then, we're not worried about on the bus because it's technically fine how it is with bell to bell and all. Okay, so
Some kids, the elementary are not allowed to use them. Middle and high school are at the discretion of the bus driver.
anybody else have any other? Okay, so I think that just Dr. Robbins will probably have to clarify operationally what the expectation will be. And we'll have to make some graphics and communicate that out.
Well, man.
And we should probably start doing that sooner than later so that it's not.
Go ahead and start
Before
working on it, waiting on the actual
Yeah.
policy, but we'll have everything ready to go.
So that's what I'm saying, because the problem with this is
Yeah.
we're trying to implement after fall or Christmas break, and this isn't going to pass until right before Christmas break. And I would like to ideally get out the communication as soon as possible, but we really can't say.
It is true that there's a state proviso, the changes are coming.
Yeah, that's a good.
We say some of that,
Advisors.
and then we can clarify details as soon as you do the policy. Yeah, I've done the policy, we can roll the exact details later.
Could we not start a communication plan sooner, like in November, like right now, just saying that state law is coming, the updates happening? Because either way, it's state law.
Yeah.
So it's not like we've, even if we
If
didn't.
everything goes well,
you know,
we should pass this December 9th.
Yes.
So we've been kind of tooling what a couple other districts have done. Rock Hill has done a really nice job of putting together statements and rollout. So we'll start putting all that.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Then not a public proposition.
I think there's only one, but I don't think.
Okay, and there is no more public comment? All right, so if everybody's okay, I would like a motion to adjourn. All right, second by Ms. Crosby, and we are adjourned. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, let's, it is.
I'm actually